Hello, 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 good people, and welcome. My name is Merle McGee, and I am the president and CEO of Everyday Democracy. And I'm delighted to welcome you to be here with us tonight. I am sitting on Lenape land in Brooklyn, New York, and I want to start our time by acknowledging that the land we inhabit are the ancestral homelands of First Nation peoples. We pay respect to all Indigenous people, past, present, and future, and for their continued presence on their homeland. For more than 30 years, Everyday Democracy has fostered a community civic resiliency through empowering thousands of everyday people from hundreds of communities to become local change leaders. We train and we coach communities to organize, facilitate dialogues, and to use democratic decision-making to address local issues. Everyday Democracy helps communities move from conversation to action, from action to lasting, equitable, just, and fair change. Our experience has shown us it is possible to create a multiracial democracy that works for all. But what we do know as well is that democracy is not evergreen. We must practice, preserve, and now more than ever, live into our democratic values and ideas of fairness, belonging, and justice. On the eve of America's 250th birthday, once again, our nation is grappling with the society that we want to become. This past election has called on us to squarely face who we really are. We will need to ask ourselves the hard questions and listen closely for the answers. But first, we have to face that there are hard questions that we must answer. And as Baldwin says, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can change, right, until it is faced. So democracy are the choices that we make. Democracy is how we use our voice and exercise our power. It is precisely at times like these, the power of community can remind us that democracy is not a single election. In a moment, we are going to be joined by our incredible organizers and learn about how they are thinking about what's next and how do we build a long-term community-driven movement for an inclusive, just, and multiracial democracy. But first, I want to offer a few housekeeping items. You can use the Q&A button to submit a question to the panel at any time during this discussion. We will try to get through as many questions as time allows. And you can also use the Q&A function to message our team if you're having trouble hearing or seeing during this discussion. If you require closed captioning, you can enable that by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. And lastly, this discussion is being recorded, but only the speakers will be visible. So let's turn our attention now and welcome our panelists. Ana Lilia Mejia is the co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy, a coalition of 50 grassroots organizations across 34 states and DC who demand transformational change for Black, brown, and low-income communities. Ana Lilia is a seasoned political strategist, an Afro-Latina grassroots organizer, focused on helping Black and Latinx communities and working families. She previously served as the deputy director for the Women's Bureau at the Department of Labor under the Biden administration, the national political director for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, and the state director of the New Jersey Working Families Alliance, a state affiliate of the Working Families Party. Welcome, Ana Lilia. Brianna Sia is the founder and executive director of Generation Vote, an intersectional youth-led movement that fights for the right to vote and a just democracy for all. Brianna is a frequent media commentator on youth voting issues and has been featured in Good Morning America, NPR, USA Today, and Ms. Magazine, among other outlets. Welcome, Brianna. Erin Heaney is the executive director of Showing Up for Racial Justice, an organization focusing on building working class power among white communities throughout the United States, focused on the South, Appalachia, and the Rust Belt to defend and expand multiracial democracy. Welcome, Erin. And just as a note, unfortunately, Aklima Kandokar is unable to join us this afternoon due to a family emergency. So we are sending her all of our care and our light and our love and strength as she supports her family in this moment. So let's get into it. Elections. Elections create a boom and bust cycle for both organizing and funding, and often leaves folks exhausted. And so my first question to the panelists, each of you, and I'll start with you, Ana Lilia. How are you? And how is your beloved community?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for holding the space. Thank you for the question. And thank you for the check-in on how I'm doing and how my beloved community is doing. I think, we are clear-headed about what we face. We understand that what we engage in we opt to participate in this struggle of pushing ourselves and our fellow human beings to lean into and live in their fullness of their humanity. See, because when people are content to set up conditions that harm other human beings in order to give themselves an advantage, they are dehumanizing themselves and those communities. And so what we engage in is this idea that we are all fully human and that we will bring both our oppressors and our community to that fuller expression. And hearing you on this question on boom and bust, in this moment, our main focus, well, frankly, going into the election, our main focus was how we could use the moment to build base. In our mind, we kept thinking about how during electoral moments, we build these sand castles, right? And then after the election, they get wiped out. And we are not capitalizing on the energy that we've put in, the sense making that we've put in, the deepened engagement that we have made happen. And so our focus in the last 3 months was how do we put rebar into the sandcastle? Are we knocking on doors and then circling back to everyone who committed to take civic action Can we come back to them and then invite them to become members of our organizations? Are we identifying people on doors who are like, I'm really interested in what you're talking about, and say, I'm going to come back and give you the political education you need so that you could be on the other side of this door next go around? And so now we're just in this moment where we are clear that since the moment this nation was founded, we have been fighting over who those words of freedom belong to. At the inception, those words of freedom embedded in the Constitution only belonged to landowning white men. And we have been engaging in a struggle to pull those words to cover us. And every time we pull, it's not like the Confederates gave up. It's not like the people who believe some humans can be owned like animals gave up, right? And so we are still engaging in this eternal struggle of what it means to be human, what it means to be human under the eyes of our government that we are beholden to, and how we live our fullest expression and bring people in. So that was long, but that was true. Thank you.
That is what is on your heart as we open this conversation, and I appreciate that. Erin, let me turn to you and ask the question, how are you and how is your beloved community?
Thanks, Merle. It's so good to be with you and Brianna and Anna-Lilia. Well, you hit the nail on the head. We're tired. We really, while democracy is so much more than elections, we did throw down really hard in this election, because our lane and movement is bringing more white people away from the forces that Anna-Lilia was just talking about, that are courting white people and trying to pull white people into the multiracial coalition, that's fighting for a better world for all of us. And so we took that charge and that responsibility really seriously because we knew how ferociously our opposition was fighting for the hearts and minds and votes of white people. And so we put it all out in the field. We talked to over 3 million white voters in all 7 battleground states. We were knocking doors. We were having phone banks, and that was after another long year of, working on squad primaries and, being on the ground, fighting some of these far right forces across the rural South too. So people are at the end of the year, they're tired. People have been, working their asses, pardon my French, they've been working hard. And yeah, and I think so that's one thing we are. And I think I think our broader team is also finding some joy and comfort in resting into community, the bigger multiracial community that we're part of. I know we're not the only ones that are tired. And, there's been so many gatherings and convenings kind of post-election across the movement where people have, begun to come together and make meaning. And, while there's many ways in which our movement needs to grow, there's also many ways in which we're much stronger and much more connected, across our organizations than we were a decade ago or than we were in 2016. And so I'm finding some real, hope in that, despite being tired at the end of the year.
Ashe. Exhausting. All right, Brianna, how are you and how is your beloved community?
Yeah, I also want to express my gratitude. I geeked out when I was on this panel, y'all. So really appreciate everyone making time to be virtually in community. I've looked up to a lot of your work throughout the years when I was a student, all the way now at Generation Vote. So just appreciate everyone here for being here. But yeah, I mean, surprise, I'm also very tired. When I saw that question, I think that's what first came to mind. I'm just speaking from my heart. My beloved community is a movement of young people. So Generation Vote, we are a movement of young people building a political home for young folks to engage in this fight for realizing what it looks like for our generation to have a truly just and multiracial democracy. So my Gen voters were also out there like y'all, knocking on doors, doing phone banks. They were doing teach-ins on the real threats of fascism and election denialism across the country. We were out there doing nonpartisan election protection to make sure that our friends and our families can vote with dignity this election cycle, despite so many barriers that were put in the way of working class and Black and brown communities to make their voices heard in this election. And so we're tired. And I think also a lot of the frustration and exhaustion that my peers, the young people, are feeling this election cycle went beyond just feeling tired from doing the physical work. I think my generation, we saw this reflected a lot in the narrative of where the youth vote, where are young people going to land this election? A lot of us are tired of these antiquated institutions. the broken two-party system that operates on systems like gerrymandering, unchecked corporate power, uncontrolled voter suppression, where millions of voters in like 27 states or something like that had to go cast their vote in states that had more voter restrictions on the books than 2020. And so we're feeling that deeply. Just this past month alone in November, I was on the ground in 7 different states where I saw these big stats I'm talking about play out in real life, where we were dealing with bomb threats in Navajo Nation, where Native voters are trying to cast their vote, and provisional ballots are being run out. We were dealing with bomb threats in Duval County, Florida. I was with students at ASU in Phoenix, in Tempe, Arizona, that had to wait on almost 3-hour lines to cast their ballots. And then I also was in North Carolina, where I saw firsthand how the new restricted voter ID laws are making it harder for seniors, first-time voters, to cast their ballots. And so I'm feeling that exhaustion physically after experiencing all these systemic issues that my generation, I think, is really recognizing that this democracy is broken. But even in this exhaustion, we can't give up. And I personally, I keep thinking back to when I was a student, the day after Donald Trump won in 2016. My peers and I at Binghamton University, we just had this massive campaign to increase student turnout. And at the end of the night, we were like crying because we were afraid of where our future was going to go. We were tired. But the next day, we sat in this like Einstein Bagel Cafe and we didn't give up. We looked at each other and we were like, we have to keep fighting for our freedoms, for our future. And that was the day Generation Vote was born. And now it's a national organization that started at this Einstein Bagel Cafe in Binghamton University. So in this exhaustion, I kind of like pull on those moments of strength. And I think being in virtual even spaces like this with y'all is also feeling my fire as I try to beat back that exhaustion this year, but also like get some rest too and recover.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I appreciate you all just giving us that check-in and giving us a sense of what it's been like for you all on the ground, really over this past year. And with the ever-shifting landscape, because obviously we know we never said it was unprecedented times, but it's been unprecedented times for a minute. And so for sure that's shifting. So let me ask you all this question. As you look back and as you've shared, right, the work on this election cycle, what, if anything, surprised you? And what have you learned that you will take forward in your electoral and voter mobilization work into the future? So, Erin, I'm going to start with you and I'm going to ask you that question. What surprised you, if anything? What have you learned that you want to take forward?
Well, I wish I could say there were a lot of surprises, but I organize white people for a living, which keeps you real rooted in reality. And so, that being said, I was surprised that he won the popular vote. To say it's not shocking, but we were anticipating that he'd win the electoral college, or that there could have been a contested election scenario. We were prepared for that scenario as well, to do election defense and work like that. But we were on the ground in places like Georgia and Wisconsin that flipped, and where our opposition has been investing and advancing all kinds of undemocratic policies and practices for years, for decades, really. And so, we were in touch with the reality of how intense the recruitment and organizing was happening in the communities that we were organizing in by our opposition. And, so I think one of the takeaways from the election is just that, the Democratic Party is losing working people. And to be clear, the core base of that support that they are lost is white people, to be clear. And, we saw in particular communities with a higher percentage of people in service and manufacturing jobs, sectors of the working class. Those sectors saw a larger uptick for Trump and for kind of anti-democratic practices and policies than wealthier, more white collar areas. And I think one of our takeaways is just the ways in which kind of anti-democratic forces are moving. They are deeply embedded in the communities that they are organizing in. And they are bombarding people and helping people find community, belonging, and to make sense of the world in all the places and spaces where people are already, right? They are, they're at church, they're on the radio, they're on people's YouTube channels. They're really, really deeply embedded in people's lives. and giving people a real sense of belonging and purpose. And, we know that they're giving people a path to power that's based on all the things we're against, misogyny, white supremacy, but they are there and they are present with people. And on the other side, so much of how funding is set up, and quite frankly, sometimes how our movements contend, is like, we're trying to just like win an election, as opposed to create communities of belonging and places where people feel like they can make meaning of the world and be connected to others. And so, one of our takeaways, which has been at the core of our work and, everyone's work on this call, is that, we can't just be doing work at election time. We actually have to do the organizing year in and year out with people on issues, but also cultivating the communities that people actually want and need to be a part of. That it is both the material things, we need to help people struggle and fight for the things that they need in their lives to lead dignified lives, but part of that is also helping people find a sense of dignity and connection with other people. So it's really the importance of doing this work all year round, year in and year out, in the places and spaces where people are.
I love that. I recently had a friend say to me, one party offers a membership that can be revoked if you're not perfect. Another is offering belonging and room for all the possibilities.
That's right.
And so I really appreciate you lifting, the incredibly important work of belonging as a part of that conversation. Brianna, anything surprise you? Anything you're taking into the future?
Yeah, I think similar to Erin, a lot of things that played out this election cycle didn't surprise me, but I also do think I wasn't expecting Trump to win the popular vote just personally. That was a surprise to me post-election. But I think there's a few things. One thing that I was a pleasant surprise for us at GenVote and our movement work is that there was a national, there's every presidential election, there's a national exit poll that goes out, right? And that's one of the first touch bases that we get as the public to get a sense of what are the issues, what were the main issues that were driving voters when they went to go cast their ballot this year. And this election cycle, there were top two issues that voters were naming consistently throughout the year, and especially during election week, that motivated their vote. The first issue, which is probably not a surprise to anyone here, is the economy, right? Rent's so freaking high, cost of living. This is also a number one issue for young voters. So that wasn't a surprise for me. But the second issue that was one of the most pressing issues for voters across the board, across ideological lines, was democracy, right? And issues around democracy might be defined different based on the person you're talking to, but it's clear that that is something that's actually uniting Americans, where they're realizing that something is wrong with our democracy, right? And for young people, there's a lot of work that I think we need to do within the democracy movement to have democracy still be seen as an urgent top five issue for young voters. But we're consistently seeing after election cycle, young people connecting the dots of like, oh, wait, I care about the climate crisis, or I care about, the economy. It comes down to issues like systemic issues with how these institutions are run and our democracy. And it's increasingly democracy itself as an issue is becoming more and more common in conversations that we're having with young voters as they name issues that they talk about. And that wasn't the case, at least in my brief little organizing career I've had so far, the past 7, 8 years. That wasn't the case 8 years ago, right? Like I would talk to friends about voting rights and democracy, and they're like, first off, that's so boring. Like there's no issues. Like they had no idea of the crisis that a generation was facing with democracy. They thought it was an issue from the civil rights era, right? But I do think our generation is becoming more and more attuned to the need to fight for our democracy along all the other issues that we care about. And so for me, that was a really kind of pleasant surprise on both on the election trail this year. And the kind of related point I'll raise with that. This year, we had a national campaign we launched with March for Our Lives, Get Free, Sunrise, a bunch of other youth movement groups around preparing the conditions for that if there were attempts to try to overturn the will of the people and try to subvert the election, that our movements would be ready. And, conversations on election denialism, election certification, which is like very, again, seen as boring topics. Young people were excited to organize around that. Like I was talking to Gen voters who were excited to do teach-ins and speak outs around demanding that our elections, that our votes be certified and counted. And that I didn't see that energy pre-2022, pre-2021 insurrection. And so I think that was also a kind of pleasant surprise for us to show that like our movement work is working, and it's going to be more important now than ever as we face a fascist regime, that we continue making democracy and fighting for democracy as an urgent issue for our movements.
Indeed. And I appreciate you lifting up the impact, right, of educate voter education, right, around how government works. I thought I knew some things, and then I learned some other things about the technicals of it, and feel, hopeful that this was an energizing conversation for young voters, because systems, the bad systems that we don't like, um, we want people to divest from those things, and the things that we want to amplify and strengthen. And also, to the point that, quite honestly, I think Coretta Scott King said this: every generation, right, works to ensure their civil rights. And that is, now is the moment. Ana Lilia, I'm going to get ready here to pivot to a section we're calling Battling Fatigue and Cynicism. So this election cycle, as we have all talked about already, was grueling. I mean, it was just grueling. And there were many issues that felt like tipping points. I know that folks are feeling a multitude of emotions that range from exhaustion to hopelessness to scared to just uncertain, but all which creates the conditions for an authoritarian regime to flourish, or folks who have a design on authoritarianism. So across the spectrum of communities, there have been calls for both rest and resistance, and, everything in between. We're hearing from leading experts that we should expect a tsunami of policy and bold actions to be taken within the first 100 days of our new administration. And I can tell you personally, 2017 felt like I was drinking from a fire hose of misery.
Yeah.
We know that we need to defend against cynicism and continue to build movements, pro-democracy movements, pro-people movements. What strategies are you using to inspire those communities that you work with to combat burnout and to build community resilience for what's needed ahead? And this question is coming to everyone, but Ana Lilia, I want you to kick us off with it. So what strategies are you using to inspire communities and combat burnout?
Okay. Well, it's funny you're asking me this. I'm sitting in the corner of the space in which we just spent the last 4 days with the majority of Popular Democracy affiliates, just tackling the question, what do we do now? And we were very intentional in making those 4 days both intensive in terms of political education, under an assessment of the changed conditions, a spaghetti at the wall session to brainstorm what are the different things that we can do in terms of action, in terms of electoral interventions, in terms of a narrative campaign that we must move, and balancing all of that with the spaciousness to rest. So convening a group of leaders for over the course of 4 days and ensuring that we had like 2-hour breaks so that in the middle of the day people could go for a hike and synthesize what we were hearing and then engage in deeper conversation. Also making sure that we incorporate joy in our planning and our assessment and our analysis. So those are some of the ways in which we're taking care of ourselves and our beloved community. I want to back out though and say, the biggest thing, like building a movement begins with, what is my role? What do I need to understand? How do I wish to show up in the world? Like the I. And then after you've aligned yourself on, you've made the decision that you are going to experience this world as someone that is focused on building towards, again, that lifelong struggle that predates us and will remain here after we have all left this earth, that we are saying we are going to engage in this righteous struggle. And then we add to that we are going to bring in others in alignment in that struggle. And then we're going to take that formation that we have created and then spread it beautifully across all community. And in order to do that, we have to begin from a place of understanding that first and foremost, like, we're not in a fight back, y'all. This isn't a let's beat back MAGA, Trump, none of that. We're not actually in that. What we're in is in a continuous, perpetual struggle over who is viewed as fully human and who is not. I mean, for millennia, this argument has happened. And this is our turn at the baton. The conditions have changed. The conditions have changed in a way in which authoritarianism is, in fact, more possible. But the struggle is the same. And so we invite ourselves into, and I invite everyone listening to this into a posture in which let's calmly look at how the conditions changed. Let's assess what is the narrative that is being applied and weaponized against us. Let's empty our pockets from all, and really assess what are all the tools that are available to us. Let's look back at history and see what was it that our ancestors did in order to reclaim the fullness of humanity and create that cognitive dissonance. What did Bayard do? What did Rosa say? What did Fannie Lou organize? And then use all of that. I'm taking this moment to become, y'all, you're going to hear me. You're going to think I got a PhD in history, because what we need to make sure what we do is that we learn from what has happened, because the struggle is continuous and their playbook is not new. I could see a through line between January 6th and this push for alternate electors of 2020 and the big lie of the big steal, the non-existent steal. I could see the through line and the exact play that was run in 1876 when the Republicans, the radical Republicans at that time, and the former Dixiecrats got into a contested election. And the way they resolved and sustained the nation, the Union, and this is after the Civil War. This is post-Reconstruction, y'all. Come with me on this little TED Talk, please. But after the Civil War and after 12 years of Reconstruction, the United States has a contested election in which the former Dixiecrats, cheated, used violence, sowed discourse, and there was a contested election. And the nation faced yet another point of friction. And the way in which the nation extricated itself from that point of friction was to cut a deal between the radical Republicans and the former Dixiecrats. And who was on the chopping block? Black people. And so we withdraw the Union troops. We allow the alternate electors to enter into a conversation. The radical Republicans get the presidency. The Dixiecrats get the removal of the federal government and federal oversight. And the states are allowed to move Black codes and Jim Crow for 100 years. That's what happened. And how we got out of it was humanizing, organizing, talking to people, moving a narrative. That's what we got to do again.
Humanizing, organizing, and
narrative.
And narrative.
We are pulling that open window.
Yes. So let me turn to you, Erin, and ask this question. What strategies are you thinking about, right? What strategies are you looking to use to strengthen, right? and inspire.
Well, I think this piece that Anna Lily just started, I think we have to learn and draw inspiration from the history, the deep history of multiracial struggle to expand democracy in this country, led by Black people. So I think that, because it's been hidden from us explicitly, and to the point that was just made, there's a lot to learn from. So I think that's something we've been experimenting with at Surge for sure. I think people, this is very simple, but I think that people need community, right? We know that the authoritarians rely on people feeling isolated and not connected, in order for them to be able to advance their agenda. And so we have been, in this moment, creating many, many spaces for people to come together, to feel like they're not alone, and to make sense of the moment and to commit to action. So like the day after the election, God bless our organizing team, they'd been working so hard. We had a mass call the day after the election. 12,000 people registered to join us. It was like we opened with song, we opened with connection, like we offered reminders that there have always been, always too few of us and always imperfectly, but there have always been white people who have chosen the side of justice and liberation throughout history, and invited people into choosing that lineage and that way of being. Like there were thousands and thousands of people. The chat was on fire. There were emojis all over the screen. Like people really were longing for a way to be together in that moment, even if we didn't have all the answers yet. And from there that night, we invited people to then invite their people into a community, and like 600 people from that call committed to hosting gatherings. And so like hundreds and hundreds of gatherings then happened across the country. Some of them were mass meetings in big cities, and some of them were like people joining in their living rooms with some of their neighbors or family members. And people again did the same thing of like coming together, making sense of the moment and committing to action. And so we now have another program where it's called the Gear Up program. And like over 6,000 people have registered to come together every 2 weeks between now and the election. Cause this is a scary time, or inauguration day. Cause this is a moment of a lot of uncertainty where we think people do need connection and fierce, and like to be able to be as fierce as we're going to need to be in the face of what's going to come, starting January 20th. And so every other week people are coming together to break isolation, to learn together, and to get ready to take action. So it kicked off last night. Linda Burnham and Ash Henderson. Linda Burnham, who's a longtime movement scholar, and Ash Henderson, who's the former ED at Highlander and a Movement for Black Lives leader, joined almost 1,800 people from across the country who came together to kick off. So we're like all about community right now. How do we create spaces for people to learn and then commit to action? And I think that's one thing we have to continue to do, because none of us can do this alone.
I love that. And I got a chance to peek the event as well. So good stuff. Brianna, I'm gonna pivot us a little bit here, because I also recognize I don't want to get out of our timing scenario, because time, social construct, but real. So let's talk about polarization and organizing. As we have been unpacking this election, we know that the results are not because of any specific group or single policy, but sort of a tapestry, if you will, of grievances and real concerns, right? Rooted in what you all have said before, that it's becoming clearer and clearer to people that the systems and structures that, as we have known them, are working for less and less people. And but to build a mass movement and to affect policies to create multiracial democracy, what we're hearing, right, is that we have to be able to come together. And at everyday democracy, that coming together is about dialogue, deliberation, and taking collective action around local issues. For us, we prioritize building the skills and the capacity of ordinary or everyday people, so that they can come and work across difference, rooted in a common purpose and shared values, but with a practical engagement with local policies that are actually shaping their daily lives. And if we're to believe the pundits, we are more divided and unforgiving across ideological differences than ever. So then I guess the question becomes, what are the opportunities that we see to organize? And the question that I pose to you, Brianna, is what is the irresistible call to action to disconnected or disaffected people? What is the irresistible call to action for young people in this moment, who may or may not see themselves connected to, or may see themselves as disaffected by the current social arrangement?
Woo! Irresistible call to action. That's a big question. I hope I can offer an inkling of what I'm thinking at least. I think for me and for us in this, at least in this moment, coming out of the election, is that we can't give up hope. I mean, despair is what fascist and authoritarian regimes thrive on. And so in this moment, as folks are feeling tired, if they're feeling disillusioned, for so many reasons that I named earlier, we can't give up hope. And at Gen Vote, I think I heard this reflected from like other panelists tonight. We believe in America, at least, that we've never had a just democracy for all, like ever. But every generation, as it was raised earlier, and I appreciated the history lesson earlier, you know, every generation has fought to get us closer to realize what could an actual just democracy look like. And as a census nerd, prior to going full time at Gen Vote, I was doing a lot of work on the census back in 2018, 2020, the census shows that my generation, Gen Z and millennials and Gen Alpha, we're going to be the most multiracial and diverse generation ever, right? We currently are, and by what, 2040 something, this country is going to be run by us, by our communities. And so I think for me, it's the call to action is to not give up hope. And I think the biggest theme I've been hearing from today's discussion is the need to not only not give up hope, but to find a political home. Um, I think I've been looking back a lot on the other movements for democracy throughout our history and throughout our time. I think one of the most inspiring things to me is seeing the same names pop up in each fight, right? It was abolitionists that also helped support the women's suffragette movement, right? It was young people in the civil rights movement that helped support and helped launch the movement to lower the voting age just 20, 30 years later. So the reason why I share that is because as we are building these political homes with organizations like Generation Vote, like everyone on this call, we're building generational leaders that are going to be invested in the fight for realizing a truly just democracy, not just now in this moment, but hopefully for their entire lives. And that's something that I keep kind of calling back to, not just in history, but even in Gen Vote's world. We actually led the first youth-led electoral justice summit in the US in Phoenix, Arizona, back in June 2024. We brought together young leaders, millennial and Gen Z leaders from over 35 organizations nationally and state-based groups. And it was just so incredible to see the energy of other young people, a multiracial group of young people that were not only recognizing the need and the threats for our generation right now, but the need to continue building this cohort, this community of young people that give a shit about the future of our democracy and to keep thinking bigger, right? Why is it that we have to, settle with these archaic institutions like the Electoral College, like the two-party system, like how elections are run in some of these states with really restrictive voter laws? We don't have to just stop there, right? We can think bigger. And at that summit, we brought these young folks to think about what could a just democracy for all look like for our generation by 2040, by 2050. And so not only, like I said, not giving up hope, but building community and building relationships with folks in your neighborhoods, in your spaces, because these are the people that are going to be in the fight with each other for years to come. And so I think that's what I kind of keep leaning back on, is like those kind of calls to action in this moment, because we got each other's backs. We count on us.
I love that. Ana Lilia, tell me briefly.
Hit me. Oh, I'm long-winded, so I don't know what to tell you, but I'll try, fam. I'll try.
I got some other questions I want to ask you. So quickly, what do you think is the irresistible call to folks who feel disconnected? And Erin, I'm coming to you after, because
Okay.
you've got different perspective. You have different positionality.
Okay, I am not going to answer your question right, but I'm still going to engage your question. And here's the not answering your question in the way you asked it, because I am actually right now, I'm trying to make something irresistible. I I I am of the belief that in order for us to form a good campaign, we got to be clear about what's the narrative that opposes us and how do we dismantle it, right? And I believe that the narrative that we are up against is one in which some people are waste people. Some people are not valuable. Some people are not human. Some people don't deserve justice or freedom or bodily autonomy or to love whom they choose or to live freely in their own bodies. That's the thing that we butt up against. And when I think about the play that has been run to oppress everyone that isn't a land owning super wealthy white man, because that is the oligarchy that has taken hold of our government. When I think about what they've done, what I see is the deconstruction of Reconstruction, the attempt to dismantle the 14th Amendment out from under us. And so, what I am currently trying to do, what I'm trying to make irresistible to people, is I'm trying to first engage and broaden our understanding of where the fight is actually happening and better understand where our power is derived within this government. And I believe we need to do more to defend the 14th Amendment. Because as the daughter of an undocumented woman, the reason I'm a citizen is the birthright citizenship embedded in the 14th. And my husband, who is descended from the formerly enslaved, the reason him and his granny and his great granny became citizens or were seen as citizens or human under or at least partially so, because the truth is we've never gained full. But the reason the descendants of the formerly enslaved, it's the 14th. Bodily autonomy, the 14th. Right to privacy, the 14th. Even the insurrection clause, the 14th, that has been weakened, but we're not engaging this touch point enough. So I'm starting with y'all because I think we need to better understand like where the fronts are. I think we could do some stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so the irresistible call is, what's the tea? Like, what is the tea?
I I I think I haven't figured out the exact way, y'all, but every fiber in my body desires to claim the fullness of humanity and make people defend their inhumane policies as much and repeatedly. I want every single person in opposition to me to feel uncomfortable when they have to defend their janky ideas because we know.
And so that irresistible call is being up on the tee, like actually the knowing the what's what. Erin, what's the irresistible call to your beloved community in this moment?
I think there's two. I mean, just to zoom out a tiny bit, there's so much conversation about kind of disaffected white working class people, which tends to be code for like how do we like move to the center and stop talking about race and throw communities of color under the bus. But what I want to recenter our beloved community are like the folks we're trying to organize. We're not trying to appease those folks. We are trying to organize people who are not in our movement yet, who we've not organized yet, who there are tens of millions of unorganized poor white people in this country. And that's who we're going after. That's who we're trying to make movement irresistible to. And, white supremacy is designed to break our natural tendency to unite, right? Like it had to be thought up to break, I think, what is all humans' natural tendency to unite. And so that gives me a lot of hope because it feels good to fight, I think. People are pissed, people are angry. And so part of what brought me into movement the first time I was in movement was getting to like be angry in public, right? Together with other people, and to feel a sense of your own power and agency alongside other people. So, I think we need to like pick, we need to pick targets, big corporate targets, not just Trump, right? But we need to pick fights with the people who are impacting our lives. And I think that's irresistible. If anyone's been in a huge action, it gives you a sense of feeling your own power. And then I think the other thing for white people is like, there's a spiritual part to this too. I mean, for all of us, but this is the lane that Serge takes up, is like, it feels really good to unlearn white supremacy, right? Like, white supremacy is not good for those of us who are white either, right? It damages our spirit, it damages our psyche. We can't actually understand the truth about anything. It makes it difficult for us to be able to create connection across lines of difference. And so that process of unlearning white supremacy, we'll be doing it for the rest of our lives. Those of us who are white, there's not some magic day it arrives, but it does make us more human and connected to other people. And so that, for me, has been a glorious part of being in movement, is getting to unlearn so much of what those of us who are white get taught about the social conditioning of white supremacy. And that is a form of freedom, to unlearn some of that. So, and that's pretty irresistible, I think, too.
I love this. So I'm hearing from you, Brianna, this questioning of the core systems, and from Ana Lilia, the irresistible thing of history as teacher and being up on the T, as the young people say. And Erin, I'm hearing you say picking that fight, right? With folks that are inhibiting the opportunity to belong to a bigger we. And yeah, Bacon's Rebellion, this is the, well, you and I talk about Bacon's Rebellion, and breaking, right, that cross-racial solidarity. So I'm gonna take some privilege here and hop to building democracy beyond elections. The nonprofit and philanthropic worlds are often limited to how we organize. And a lot of times, movement people will say having a nonprofit limits how you organize. So we're always working, or often working, issue by issue, right? That's how the structure is sort of set up. And yet we know that the structures we've created actually connect the issues, and all of the issues are interconnected, and you all are doing a wonderful job in elevating that for us tonight. So that means we have to be thoughtful, right, in this moment, that we need to align justice, right, frameworks and ideas with civil society, right? Justice and civil society, a just civil society, to build the democracy in the world we all deserve. So this is our last question before we transition into open questions for folks. What specific strategies are required to accomplish this goal? What structures do we need to leave in the past? And what do we need to build for the future? Building democracy beyond elections. I am feeling like I'm going to come to you, Ana Lilia, with this first. And Brianna, will go to you, and then Erin.
I think first and foremost, place-based power building, we have to return to the idea of deepening engagement and organizing in geography, and figure out ways in which we aren't, how do I explain this? Because of the structure of our funding and the way in which our organ.
Uh-oh. You see, they didn't want us to hear the words. We'll get her back. Brianna, let me come to you as we bring Ana Lilia back, and we'll have her finish her response.
Yeah, it was like a drop mic moment. But yeah, I guess what I will just offer when I hear like what institutions or what structures, I think one thing I'm going to share is like what's a mindset that we need to leave behind in this nonprofit philanthropic space. Oftentimes when people think about young people during election cycles, it's very transactional and it's all about the youth vote, right? And so much of the investment are in the youth voting ecosystem is around nonpartisan voter registration, get out the vote, which is great. And we still need to do that. Gen Vote, we do that work too. But we can't stop there. The amount of times I talk to funders and other nonprofit partners and they talk about youth voters, it's only in the sense of how are the youth vote going to turn out? But it's not actually understanding what are the issues that young people care about when it comes to not only casting their vote, but the institutions that they're voting in and for and all of the above, right? And that's what we're trying to change. That we're trying to leave behind that mindset that my generation, we're not just a vote, we're not just a number, we're not just a stat on election night or in the lead up to election week. We are a generation of leaders that can change the conversation about what it means to fight for our democracy. And I take hope, and I can do a whole tangent on this, but I'm Thai, Korean, Chinese American, so one of my motherlands is popping off right now for the pro-democracy movement. So I'll just say that. And so I think I take hope in looking at other youth-led pro-democracy movements around the world where young people are changing the conversation of what it means for for our generation in their countries to be engaging in the electoral process, to be engaging in the fight for democracy and constitutional and electoral reform. And so I think that's the mindset I want folks to have and to leave behind this idea that young people we're just young, a vote, right? We're so much more than that in the democracy space and the democracy movement. I see Anna Lily is back.
I'm
Yeah,
back.
and
Sorry, my bad.
no problem.
No,
And
these were like mic drop. That was
right.
so great.
It's about building power, right? And so recognizing that. Ana Lily, you want to finish your response, and then I'll go to
Yeah.
Erin.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. And ironically, this is what happens when I join a call on the family iPad. I just gave myself my own time limit on parents listening can totally understand what just happened there. All right. So where I was going was because of the way in which our organizations and our movement are funded, so much of the resources are anchored around an idea, an issue, a moment. So we get money to build on housing. We get money to engage in an election. We get money to move a particular cohort of people. And it forced us to move away inadvertently or intentionally. I don't know, jury's out, but it's moved us from an idea of digging into and building the kind of connection and power and leadership that is place based. Right. And so I think we need to return the moment is calling for is both like learning across history and community, but doing that work of y'all, we know that there are levers of power. We know not only where they are situated, but how to capture them, how to make them, align them to to the way in which we see our world, which is one in which we are human and deserve to be free. And so I think the main thing, again, that I am focusing on in the next 24 months is where are those levers of power? Where are the opportunities in which if I develop enough trained, informed, engaged people, and I help move a relational organizing model across these communities, that maybe, just maybe, we can stop the further consolidation of authoritarian power in the United States. I know that we have done it before, so I feel fully confident that we can do it again. So handing it to you, I think. We're giving it to Erin to bring us home.
I mean, yeah, I don't have too much more to add. We need more power. And yes, we need power building institutions that are rooted in place, like CPD, like Generation Vote, who are with people, as I said earlier, year in and year out. And I think, we have to be laser focused on building power. And I think at the same time, we need institutions to be actively cultivating solidarity. I think sometimes we don't do that piece as intentionally, but we know that our opposition is going to try to use everything they can to divide our forces and to divide the people in the bases that we need most to be organizing. And so, I think we have to be actively taking on those issues, consciously, and doing the ideological development with our people too, to help people understand and believe much deeper than we do in this country, that we belong to each other, right? That we are all fully human, as Ana Lilia has been saying, right? And I think we've lost that. Many of our institutions don't take that on consciously, and I think we have to do that. Otherwise, I think we're going to continue to see some of our folks, be organized into reactionary solidarity, right? With people, with elites at the top. And so we've got to be ruthlessly focused on power. And part of a power building strategy has to be inoculating our people and developing our people to be able to resist that kind of organizing that's also happening in our communities as well by our opposition. So
I love that. Anyone who we hear or potentially define as opposition irresistibly could be viewed as just people we haven't organized yet towards humanity, right? Our human self. Okay, hey, we are going to start to turn our attention to the Q&A that's in the Q&A section. So while there's so much more we could be talking and, we're about and want to hear, I certainly have more questions to ask. But let's actually now turn our attention to that Q&A section, and we have a few questions there. So Shannon, I'm going to invite you to share with us a question, and invite others to keep submitting questions through the Q&A function, and we'll try to get through as many as possible.
Yeah, thanks. The first question comes from Liliana. It says, can we hold space for how we can strategize and protest with our hard-earned dollars? For example, no longer shopping or contributing to the corporations and organizations that don't care about the working class, people of color, and immigrants.
Anybody feel like they have a strategy or a thought about that? Or maybe you know something about some campaigns that are underway.
Are you campaigns underway with specific targets, like corporate targets, or
just anyone who wants to respond to this question around how do we hold space and strategize, right, and protest with capital responses to a capitalist society?
Okay, so I will start like macro, and then like I asked around corporate targets in particular. I'll try to do a little on both ends. Eat the sandwich on both sides. Okay. So one, it is, my understanding rooted in history and movement. But it strikes me that at the core of the systems and structures that we all are organizing against, and that many generations have organized against before us, at the root of it is racial capitalism. It is the idea that is fundamental to American capitalism and America's economic system, in which there is a group of people, usually around race, gender, and obviously class, but particularly race and in many ways gender, in which our economic system is built to extract from in order to enrich a different set of people. And it's baked into almost every system and structure, right? It is the reason why we have union busting. It is the reason why we don't have earned sick days or paid family leave. It is the reason why prisons are built in predominantly white communities that employ that community of CEOs and make every single imprisoned person 3/5 a man or 3/5 a person, right? And so it's this idea of moving people, taking from a set of people who we deem not human, not worthy, waste people, in order to enrich the machine. And so at the very core is this extraction. Now, specifics in this moment, someone is going to become richer and some of us are going to become poorer, and it will become very evident very quickly. We have the last cycle to glean how it's going to play out. And so to me, the first thing, I'm sure for many even listening here, they're like, what is she even talking about? What is this racial capitalism? Like what? So part of what we have to do and start with is a better understanding of how our economic system is working and how it's going to be weaponized or manipulated in order to put some at advantage and others at a disadvantage. That's what we're moving on doors. Now, the struggle is how to take all of that wonky AF information and turn it into something that is not only easy to understand, but also easy to repeat. And obviously the struggle is real. We struggle with how we make that message of extraction, of inhumanity, of inequity, and how it actually harms the entire system and community. Easy enough for my sister, my cousin, my play cousins, my mom, who doesn't even speak English, to understand. That is what we are actively engaging now. That is perhaps not a satisfactory answer, but hopefully it piques y'all's interest, all those who are listening, on taking a stab of how do you name the ills that we experience with our bodies and our soul and put them into words that are easy to resonate, connect to, and repeat.
Anyone else want to jump in on this question, or shall we move to a new question?
Great. I'm going to move us along to another question. What are your plans for 2025?
Erin, hop in. What y'all up to?
Well, folks should join our Gear Up cohort if they want to get into formation. That's what we, to be honest, we're still figuring the plans out, because we're, to be totally transparent, we're figuring this out like everyone else. And there's a couple things we do know. We know that we need more power, right? We know that we need to grow our movement and welcome and train a lot more people into action. And so over the course of the year, we're going to be using every horrible thing that the Trump administration does as an organizing opportunity to welcome more and more people in who are waking up to the horrors of racial capitalism, authoritarianism, all the horrible things that are up. We want to use it as a moment to not say like, well, where have you been? But instead say, welcome, you're needed, you belong here. And so, we will be having webinars, we will be having community meetings, some of the stuff I named earlier. Every moment like that is an opportunity to organize. So, we're going to be doing a blend of the work that's going to be needed to defend, the communities who are going to be most on the front line. So we will be, organizing alongside so many of our comrades who will be defending our immigrant families. We'll be doing work on that issue. We'll be doing work to defend queer and trans kids largely. We'll be doing work to defend our movement from attacks, our ability to even organize. So a lot of our work, if you're joining our calls, we're going to be, deploying people out to the fights as they emerge. And at the same time, we know we can't just be running towards every fire that this administration is gonna be setting. And so we are proactively going to places and spaces where we know we need our movement stronger, alongside folks like people at CPD and People's Action and so many other groups across the country. We're all coming together to figure out where do we need to get stronger and how do we do the kind of not glamorous work that most people don't see, which is the door knocking, the having the conversations, inviting people to community meetings, and then bringing people in to struggle together to push back on, the issues that are impacting their lives. So, we're both going to be doing reactive stuff, but also the power building work so that, we're able to keep democratic space open, right? So we can continue to have elections and expand democratic space instead of seeing it continue to shrink. So, there's lots of details we're still figuring out, but we're going to be playing both offense and defense alongside a whole group of other comrades across the country who are doing, work in other working class communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess similar, probably Erin just shared. A lot of us are just, but still figuring it out in the sense that, the political conditions have changed. And so, I think there's also been a lot of anxiety and like a lot of like, we gotta go now. And one thing I really appreciated from my comrades and like even like folks on this panel too, is that um, we're in this generational fight, right? And so it's okay for us to be still strategizing and figuring out what does it look like to be fighting for our communities in the next, not just next year, but next 4 years. But I can share at least what GenVote's thinking more broadly. So like if you're a young person or a young person on this call that wants to get involved in the fight for voting rights and a just democracy for all, every year we have our Just Democracy for All organizing fellowship program, and they can also start GenVote teams and hubs. You don't have to be a fellow. This is a volunteer-led movement, and we support our young people in developing these political homes in their communities, whether it be at their high school, their college, just their city, their town, with their friends, their neighbors. And so join our movement, right? That's like the work that Erin was describing, in which we are building this community of young people, training our folks up so that they can engage in the defensive fights that we need at the national level. In terms of the national level, some things that a lot of us are thinking through is, Project 2025, they put out their plan for how they're going to plan on, continuing to rig our elections and continuing to try to dismantle free and fair elections in this country. And so we're going to be proactively on the national level fighting back against things like the ACE Act, the SAVE Act. I'm forgetting the full name of the bills, so I can put the acronym in the chat. But there are some really anti-voter, anti-democracy bills that the upcoming administration and congressional leadership will be trying to push. And we need to be training up our young people to be alert and to, and to be with us in the fight and to defend DC home rule, right, for our DC comrades on this call, things like that. But also by joining our movements, we're also talking about what does it mean to continue building this vision for our generation to fight for just democracy for all. And so we are launching our youth-led Electoral Justice Alliance in 2025. So if you are part of an organization that wants to learn more about that movement, about our summit, that's something that we are continuing next year as well, that I mentioned earlier. So you can reach out to us. And the third thing I'll raise is kind of like Erin suggested too, is like really doubling down too on what does it mean to be building power at the local level. GenVote, like I've said earlier, was founded during my college time when my first elections when Trump was elected, and it was even during that kind of dark time where it was young people, everyday Gen voters that fought for the first voter reforms in my home state of New York, and we were able to pass the first voter laws in over 100 years by helping start one of the largest grassroots coalitions in New York State that fought for things like early voting, automatic registration, pre-registration, things that made it easier for everyday working class and young New Yorkers to make their voices heard in elections. And one of the most beautiful things for me is every election since 2019, I go out and I see my neighbors voting early and telling me how they were able to cast their vote during a time that worked for them with their work schedules, and that they felt so grateful to like have an opportunity to like make their voices heard when they didn't have that chance, when we only had one day of voting in New York State, right? That all happened during the time that Trump was president. And so for us, we're going to be doubling down on what does it mean to be fighting for these pro-democracy agendas at the local level, so that we can lay the foundation for when the moment and the political conditions are right, we can fight for larger transformative reforms at the national level to ensure free and fair elections that protect our generation's freedom to vote.
Thank you for that, Brianna. And that really is sort of taking me to a question.
Wait. I want to share because I saw Matt's spicy question. I just want to lay out a piece here. We have 24 months before the additional consolidation of authoritarian power takes place through these midterm elections. We have learned previously that those elections are both a litmus test, but also like a destabilizing or restabilizing moment for either party, right? Remember the Obama shellacking. So what the task at hand is, I'm going to be honest, best case scenario is in fact that they overreach for those 24 months and that we use every single one of those overreach to point to and say, you see, similar to what Aaron is saying. There is a set of districts, there's about like 24 districts in which Republicans have won by close to just getting 55% of the vote, in which we are leaving the number of people who are probably in alignment with us in our communities, right? That the number of people that are reachable by us outnumber that margin of victory. 24 districts across the country, congressional districts, y'all, in New York, in California, in Ohio, you name it, we got them. Even my home state of New Jersey. And so to your question, one, we need to be clear about where are the places in which they win by the skin of their teeth. Where are the places in which we could spend the next 24 months just educating people and being relentless? Where's the place-based power building that we could do in those congressional districts? Bonus points. That's 2025. But then you imagine that there's a whole set of districts, maybe some of those that are in 2025, but there's another set that if we were to build at the state and local level, then we are able to disrupt the double-sided pen of redistricting. By that, I mean by 2029, there's a whole set of state legislative districts in which we must build power or it's going to be further consolidation. Well, guess what, y'all? Those congressional districts and those state districts, they overlap. And the need to build power in those places and spaces is right on top of it. So I see a triple word score. So everyone that's here, you could start doing that right now. You don't even need me, but I'll send you the list because you can actually see where it is that their margin of victory is too tight to hold on if we come out. So that is what we're trying to do. And that is what we're going to do. And that is what we invite you to participate in. Now, please ask the question, Merle.
Well,
you know me.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing a lot from all of your responses is the need to get in where you fit in.
Yes.
Right? Find your lane and ride it, drive it, whatever. But also to operate at the most micro level in order to see a change affected at a macro level. Adrienne Marie Brown, in her brilliant book, Emergent Strategy, talks about small is all, right? That the fractals make up the whole of an organism. And I'm really appreciating the invitation to people to not ignore the broader national context, but to hone in on the most hyperlocal opportunities to transform what is happening right where you are that will have an effect on a national scale. If, in fact, you believe that democracy is something that you practice at home, right where you are. You don't need to go to the ballot box every 4 years or every 2 years, for that matter, to practice democracy. There are opportunities every day that people can plug into to drive that kind of change. All right. Shannon, do we have one more question in there before we close?
Yeah, one more question is a group that's still hardly mentioned but seen as less than human is incarcerated folks. How do we bring them in? How do we show that they too are part of our family?
Jumping right in, bump it. Y'all like rip band-aids. I think about all of the incredible work my brother from another mother, Desmond Meade, and a bunch of incredible organizers did in Florida to activate and claim greater power and access for the formerly incarcerated, and where the response was a pivot to move the goalpost, to then, introduce a poll tax in effect. Oh, if you don't, okay, fine. You've done all the work to organize. You've done all the work to move your community to take action. They voted for a particular thing. Now we're going to slap you with an economic hurdle. I think, one, we need to take lessons from the incredible work that impacted community has already done and follow their lead in terms of moving policies and having impacted people at the forefront. That's first and foremost. Taking the lessons and the strategy that was applied in Florida and in other states to expand the rights of the formerly incarcerated. I also want to expand that, this struggle on seeing all of ourselves as human. We're going to likely experience a roundup of criminalized immigrants and American citizens, because I want to remind y'all that there will be children, there are mixed status families. And so we are going to have American citizens and immigrants who are seeking to either free extricate themselves from violent conditions, both economic violence and physical violent conditions, looking to establish a decent, upstanding life. We're going to watch millions get herded, and I am actually afraid they won't be deported. I am afraid that we will figure out ways to further extract from people. And let's only ethnocentrism and the muddled, confused belief that America is somehow better than every other place would lead us to believe that we wouldn't see internment camps, just like we did in America against the Japanese and other folks in World War II. So I think in this moment, this is why I keep coming back to this idea of fullness of humanity, because we are going to watch families torn apart and kids come home and their mom and their dad won't be there. And we're going to watch people run out of workplaces or hospitals or schools, put themselves in danger. We're going to see all of that. And what are we going to say? So we're the criminalization of our communities, the name calling, the dehumanization of calling us vermin or political opponents, the enemy within, or saying that all immigrants are unwelcomed and expelled, or that those who have made mistakes in their lives, that they are to be completely thrown away, we're disposable. All of it comes back to, how are we going to call on ourselves and name like the inhumanity that we are going to witness? Are we prepared to do it? Will we be brave enough to do it? Because they'll come for us the moment we do. So. But we can. I mean, I'm confident. I'm confident. I know we've done it before. I know we can.
Thank you for that, Ana Lilia. And it really kind of puts us in the zone of any final thoughts. So, Erin, I'll turn to you and ask you for any final thoughts that you have, because Ana Lilia, you definitely gave us food to think about. And Brianna, I'll come to you next, and then we'll close out.
I might just build on that last question as a final thought, which is like, many of us have not organized under the conditions that we are about to be under. But there are plenty of places, including people who have organized on the inside for generations, that we can look to as sources of inspiration. The kind of, organizing inside a prison is organizing under authoritarianism. And there are plenty of international comrades across the world who have organized under conditions like the ones we are about to head into. And so, the kind of creativity, the kind of bravery, the kind of relentlessness that it takes to organize inside a prison or for folks who are incarcerated, I think we can look to folks who have been doing this kind of work as we begin to enter this next phase of organizing, for inspiration, for leadership, and for lessons. I'm looking at a picture of Bobby Sands on my desk, who was incarcerated in Northern Ireland, who that's part of my lineage. And so I think, we all need to, lean on the lineages that we all come from, the lineages of resistance that we have as we face this down, and commit to action, because together a lot really is possible, even under harsh conditions. So good to be with you all.
Thank you, Erin. Brianna.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we laid out a lot in today's discussion, and I know that it might be a lot to take in, and I just encourage folks to continue if you feel called to take rest and to recover. I think people have probably heard this a million times. Like it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And so I know I'm taking that seriously personally, and I just really appreciated being with all of you guys here today, and hope that y'all are able to leave this conversation feeling hopeful. Like I said earlier, I think one thing I keep repeating to my folks, my beloved community of Gen voters and just my friends, other young people, is that we can't give up hope. If we do so, that's intentional, right? If we become hopeless, right, that's what they want. That's what the opposition wants, and we can't give in. And so, just don't give up hope. And I also hope that y'all take time to recover and rest and be charged up for the fights that are to come. So that's the last thing I'll offer, and just appreciate being here with y'all. It definitely filled my cup hearing from all of you guys.
Thank you, each of you, Brianna, Erin, Ana Lilia. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the folks who are out here listening, engaging, asking the tough questions, being saucy or spicy. I think Ana Lilia said we need that energy. So let's keep it real. The conversation's been fantastic. And this is our second conversation in our Doing Democracy virtual series. We will continue to hold these events, so look for more of these events in 2025, and we hope you'll join us. We'll be sending out an email with some resources from the panelists and linking the recording to the main panel, which we hope you'll share with everyone as well. Thank you so very much for your time, your energy, your work, your commitment, your grappling, your all the things. If we had all the answers, we'd be living a very different life. But this is what it is, and this is what we're doing. So much appreciation to each of you. And cue the music.